Stephen King put it succinctly when he said, "Books are the perfect entertainment. No commercials, no batteries, hours of enjoyment for each dollar spent. What I wonder is why everyone does not carry a book around for those inevitable dead spots in life." Tonight we honor and acknowledge the writers participating in the Tucson Festival of Books. They are the ones who bring words and imagination to life. From Celeste Ng to T. Jefferson Parker to Lisa Wingate to Joshua Green, we are awed by their passion, talent, and achievement. Their wit, thoughts, and ideas are a wonderful gift for all of us. For those authors like James Rollins, Thridi Umrigar, Doug Stanton, and Kara Black, who are returning to the festival, we sincerely appreciate your support. And to the newcomers, like Margarita Engel, A.J. Finn, and Allison Camarota, we hope this is the first of many visits to Tucson and the festival. In 2011, the Tucson Festival of Books established the Founders Award. The award honors literary achievement that has captivated our imagination and whose body of work will be an inspiration to readers, writers, and book lovers. Tonight, we honor and are especially pleased to honor Billy Collins with the 2018 Founders Award. Billy Collins is an American phenomenon. No poet since Robert Frost has managed to combine high critical acclaim with such broad popular appeal. His last 3 collections of poems have broken sales records for poetry. His readings are usually standing room only, and his audience includes people of all backgrounds and age groups. The poems themselves best explain his broad appeal. The typical Collins poem opens on a clear and hospitable note, but soon takes an unexpected turn. Poems that begin in irony may end in a moment of lyric surprise. No wonder Collins sees his poetry as a form of travel writing and considers humor a door into the serious. It is a door that many thousands of readers have opened with amazement and delight. He's the author of 12 collections of poetry, including his newest, The Rain in Portugal. In 2001, Collins was named Poet Laureate of the United States and the New York State Poet from 2004 to 2006. In 2016, he was inducted into the American Academy of Arts and Letters. Here is a short clip on our Founders Award recipient.
When I was United States Poet Laureate, and I love saying that, it's a great way to start sentences. I don't know why, but I wanted desperately to be a poet ever since I was in high school. My poems are about little things. They're about whether the salt and pepper shakers get along, you know, and that kind of stuff. Walking the dog. A dog on his master. As young as I look, I am growing older faster than he. 7 to 1 is the ratio they tend to say. Whatever the number, I will pass him one day and take the lead, the way I do on our walks in the woods. And if this ever manages to cross his mind, it would be the sweetest shadow I have ever cast on snow or grass. I think it starts out with a casual, straightforward tone, trying to just get the reader engaged in the first stanza. I hope the poem, as it goes on, gets more complicated, a little more demanding, a little more ambiguous or speculative, so that we're drifting away from the casual beginning of the poem into something a little more serious.
The country, I wondered about you when you told me never to leave a box of wooden strike-anywhere matches just lying around the house because the mice might get into them and start a fire. But your face was absolutely straight when you twisted the lid down on the round tin where the matches, you said, are always stowed. Who could sleep that night? Who could whisk away the thought of the one unlikely mouse padding along a cold water pipe behind the floral wallpaper, gripping a single wooden match between the needles of his teeth? Who could not see him rounding a corner, the blue tip scratching against a rough-hewn beam, the sudden flare, and the creature, for one bright, shining moment, suddenly thrust ahead of his time, now a fire starter, now a torchbearer in a forgotten ritual, little brown druid illuminating some ancient night? And who could fail to notice, lit up in the blazing insulation, the tiny looks of wonderment on the faces of his fellow mice, one-time inhabitants of what once was your house in the country?
Poetry has become, it's probably the most egotistical of the arts because the self is foregrounded and the self is the subject, the I. I mean, if you're writing fiction or writing plays, you should probably be interested in the lives of other people. That's not required if you're a poet. You need to be interested in your life. So the fiction writer is kind of looking in people's windows and observing their domestic secrets. And the poet is looking out his or her window in the world and talking about, this is how I see it.
Please, a warm welcome for Billy Collins. Well deserved. Billy, it's truly our honor to present you with the 2018 Founders Award. As a memento, we have, kind of in keeping with our theme this year, this is a coyote storyteller, a Native American coyote storyteller, and we'll present it to you. We hope it brings you many memories and thoughts of the Tucson Festival of Books.
Thank you so much. Should I let down here? Thank you so much, Bill. And I will treasure that storyteller. It's so good to be here with all you authors, the people you have interest in other people. It's amazing. And a few poets who are just interested in themselves. But I'm an only child, which is the perfect preparation for not being interested in other people. But it's great to have this gathering and wonderful, especially to receive this award. I always think receiving an award when you've been writing for a long time just kind of reminds me of where I started, that I didn't start receiving awards. No one does that unless in your fantasy life. But I remember, I started writing poems in high school. By the way, this is going to be not that long. Not the year-to-year memoir version. But and then through high school, college, graduate school, and beyond. And then when I was around 37 or 38 years old, I discovered something. I discovered this voice. And my voice, that I began writing poems in that voice, and I'm still writing poems roughly in that same voice. And that voice was not the result of introspection or navel-gazing and wondering about the authenticity that may lie somewhere inside me. That voice was formed by reading. That voice had an external source. And I think most of your authors will agree that you learn your voice, you learn how to write from other writers. You listen to the conversation of other writers, and you find a place where maybe you fit in. So I think, I think it starts very, but it all starts out in a kind of childish way. There's a kind of childlike curiosity about words. Patrick Kavanagh, as an example, the Irish poet, said that, he said, I began fooling around with words, and at some point it became my life. John Updike said, becoming a writer was like being swallowed by a hobby. In both cases, the fooling around and the hobbyist concern for the material involves a kind of casual interest, not setting out to be a writer or to receive an award. And I'm just trying in these years to keep that hobbyist alive and to keep that fooling around alive, because that is really the kindling that starts the whole thing. Now, you're not going to get away without hearing a poem. And, I'm going to do something I've never done before, which is to read a poem from a smartphone, which suddenly seems smarter than me. So it's a poem called, and here it is, it's a poem called The Trouble with Poetry. It's not that long, don't worry. It's only about one of the troubles with poetry. The trouble with poetry. The trouble with poetry, I realized as I walked along a beach one night, cold Florida sand under my bare feet, a show of stars in the sky. The trouble with poetry is that it encourages the writing of more poetry, more guppies crowding the fish tank, more baby rabbits hopping out of their mothers into the dewy grass. And how will it ever end unless the day finally arrives when we have compared everything in the world to everything else in the world? And there's nothing left to do then but quietly close our notebooks and sit with our hands folded on our desks. Poetry fills me with joy, and I rise like a feather in the wind. Poetry fills me with sorrow, and I sink like a chain flung from a bridge. But mostly, poetry fills me with the urge to write poetry, to sit in the dark and wait for a little flame to appear at the tip of my pencil. And along with that, the longing to steal, to break into the poems of others with a flashlight and a ski mask. And what an unmerry band of thieves we are, cut purses, common shoplifters, I thought to myself, as a cold wave swirled around my feet and the lighthouse moved its megaphone over the sea, which is an image I stole directly from Lawrence Ferlinghetti, to be perfectly honest, the bicycling poet of San Francisco, whose little amusement park of a book I used to carry in a side pocket of my uniform up and down the treacherous halls of high school. Thank you.
Julia, you know I love you in a way that's appropriate for the workplace. Please welcome, to speak to us on behalf of Tucson Medical Center, Ms. Julia Strange.
I've never been quite introduced like that, so thank you very much. Oh. Jacqueline, I'm not going to be have quite so much flair. I'm here to introduce Jacqueline Woodson. She is the 2014 National Book Award winner for her award-winning memoir, Brown Girl Dreaming, which is also the recipient of the Coretta Scott King Award, a Newbery Honor Award, and the NAACP Image Award. She is the author of the award-winning novel, Another Brooklyn, which was a 2016 National Book Award finalist, and Woodson's first adult novel in 20 years. She is the author of more than 24 award-winning books for young adults, middle graders, and children. In 2015, Woodson was named the Young People's Poet Laureate by the Poetry Foundation, and she just received the 2018-2019 National Ambassador for Young People's Literature by the Library of Congress. These are incredible awards. But I have some interesting facts about Jacqueline. She can only write with her notebook turned sideways. I do the same thing, so that was kind of cool. When she was a kid, she wrote with it turned upside down. She once wrote a book in 2 weeks, and it only needed a little revision. The next book took her 4 years. Even though she can walk to the Brooklyn Nets game from her house, she is still a diehard Knicks fan. Jacqueline knows the lyrics to about 1,000 bad songs from the 1970s, including some songs from TV commercials and television shows. Maybe she will sing one of those for us tonight. She laughs at really dumb jokes. And last but not least, and my very favorite part of the script that was given to me, she can shake her eyeballs in bright light. Pretty awesome. Please give a warm Tucson welcome to Jacqueline Woodson.
I love Billy Collins so much because he is the we of me. Carson McCullers by Jacqueline Woodson. It's so cool to be here. It's so cool to be in this room. It's so cool to be up front, even though it's 9 o'clock, and I'm gonna speak so ding-dang fast because I know y'all are tired and you've eaten, you've drank the wine, it's time to move on. I was at a reading at Books of Wonder in New York City, and it was a reading of Madeleine L'Engle's A Wrinkle in Time. And Peter, the guy who owns Books of Wonder, had asked a bunch of readers to come read from the book and talk about how much they love the book, and in return, they get tickets to the screening. And I have a 10-year-old and a 15-year-old, and so I knew I was gonna go hoe for those tickets. So, we're all on this panel, and everyone's talking about waxing poetic about Wrinkle in Time in the 8th grade, and you know how it changed their life and how it inspired their writing and where in their writing it came from. And when they got to me, I was like, you know, I got to tell you the truth. I'm just here for the free movie tickets. But you know, I love Wrinkle in Time now, because I read it as an adult and I got it, but as a kid, I wasn't feeling it so much. And I love this festival. This is probably my 6th time being at the Tucson Festival. I love saying T-Fob. I love all the people who show up. It's LA Times Book Festival, and this one are 2 of my favorite festivals in the country, and I feel like this is much more relaxed than LA. So, at the same time, I'm here for the weather. I live in Brooklyn, New York, and you know what's happening there. So when the idea of coming to Tucson in March is like, hell yeah. So I just want to take a moment in the African American tradition. First of all, I want to take a moment to integrate the stage a little bit. And in the African American community, we have a ritual of calling the ancestors back into the room. And for all of y'all out there, I know you know people who've moved on to the next place, and death sucks. I mean, it really, really sucks. And maybe not for the people who move on to the next place because they don't come back, so I think they're having a good time wherever they are. But for the ones of us who have to stay behind, it's hard. And one of the things we do, as DJ Older will help me let you know, is we call the ancestors back into the room to be with us, to acknowledge us, to know that we're not walking through this world alone. And so we just take like 2 or 3 minutes and name the people who've died, who we've lost in this world, and who are in this room with us, although we can't see them. We know they're here. So I'm going to start with my grandmother, Georgiana Irby, my mother, Marianne Woodson, and Lucy Brock-Broido, who I adored, and also Jonathan Demme, who I adored. Welcome back. Anyone else? DJ, help me out. Okay. Anyone lose anyone over the past year, past month? When I've known I wanted to be a writer since I was 7 years old, and I just want to take a moment for the writers in the room to say thank you. I know this year has been jacked up for writing. I know we have sat in our writing spaces and been like, what the hell are we doing here, and how do we continue to tell our stories in this hot mess of America? But we are not here alone, and we're standing on the shoulders of people who had these kind of struggles before us and who have survived them and who have lived to tell their story or lived to procreate and produce us to tell those stories. So when we sit down to those writing desks and we're thinking, what do I even say about this mess? Know that we're here because we have something to say, and because we have a right to say that something, and because that something's going to make this country just a little bit better than it is. So I see you, I appreciate you, and the world needs your stories, so please keep writing. When I was writing Brown Girl Dreaming, which is a memoir of, oh my goodness, I almost said a memoir of my life, and then y'all would have tweeted the hell out of how redundant that was. So I'm so glad I caught myself. And the other thing I hate is fiction novel. How many of you hear people say, I'm writing a fiction novel? Okay, 2 more. Nodding the head. You can't nod anything else. Shrugging the shoulders. You can't shrug anything else. So when I see those in a book, it's like, next. And I want to give a shout out to the National Book Award finalists for 2017. You guys are phenomenal men. And Lisa, I loved your work so much. For those of you who don't know, I was the chair of the National Book Awards this year. And it was a tough row to hoe because there was so much brilliance in the room. And Pachinko and The Leavers are 2 of the most amazing books you will ever read, so please read them. February 12th, 1963. I thought I knew what day I was born. I am born on a Tuesday at University Hospital, Columbus, Ohio, USA, a country caught between black and white. I am born not long from the time or far from the place where my great-great-grandparents worked the deep, rich land, dawn till dusk, unfree, drank cool water from scooped-out gourds, looked up and followed the sky's mirrored constellation to freedom. I am born as the South explodes, too many people, too many years, enslaved and emancipated, but not free. The people who look like me keep fighting and marching and getting killed so that today, February 12, 1963, and every day from this moment on, brown children like me can grow up free, can grow up learning and voting and walking and riding wherever we want. I am born in Ohio, but the stories of South Carolina already run like rivers through my veins. I don't know how many of you have this story, but I've written 30 books now, maybe 32. I stopped counting. And I've known I wanted to be a writer since I was 7 years old, and my family was part of the Great Migration. So for those of you who don't know, from the early 1900s to the mid to late 1970s, millions of black people left the very oppressive conditions of South Carolina for better opportunities in places like Chicago, California, New York City, Philadelphia, it goes on. And my mom brought us from South Carolina to Brooklyn, New York, to basically escape Jim Crow. And so when I said I wanted to be a writer, she was like, oh, hell no. You know, basically, because it was hard to get out of the South, we were the foundation of that place. And white folks did not want us to leave, not because they loved us, but because, you know, we were their cotton pickers, and we were their child care workers, and we were their chauffeurs, and we were the foundation. So it was very hard for black folks to leave South Carolina. So my mom got the three of us out, my sister, my older brother, and I out, and brought us to New York City, where her youngest daughter was like, I want to be a writer, I want to be a writer. And she's like, no, you're going to get a job and leave my house. But I was a really, really slow reader, and my sister was, quote unquote, brilliant, as the teacher said. I didn't see it, but they saw something. And so, you know, coming behind her, it was like, Jacqueline Woodson, what fresh hell is this? But I loved words, and I loved stories, and I loved writing. And so from the time I learned how to write my name, Jacqueline Amanda Woodson, I knew I wanted to be a writer. And I didn't know how I was going to do it. So my mother brought us to Brooklyn, and I grew up in a neighborhood called Bushwick. And Bushwick, not the Bushwick that you see on Girls and the new Bushwick. I grew up in the old Bushwick. And that was a very different place. And people didn't grow up to be writers. They grew up to get jobs. And so I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I knew I loved doing it. And I think the aha moment for me came when I had a teacher who said, when you choose a career, choose something you love doing, because you're going to be doing it for the rest of your life. And I couldn't imagine doing anything else besides writing for the rest of my life, no matter who was saying, no, you can't do that. So I wrote, and I wrote, and I wrote. And this is a piece called Tobacco. So when I was when my mother left us in South Carolina to go look for a place in Brooklyn, she left us with my grandmother and my grandfather. So I was born in Ohio, Buckeye to the bone, me and RL. And one thing about tonight, I texted my 10-year-old son to say I was giving this keynote and that I had just run into R.L. Stein. He's like, I don't care about the keynote, get the selfie. So, and that's kind of how I roll as a writer, right? My daughter, who's 16, when she was 14, she was on her school bus going, heading out, and I texted her, and her friend had her phone, and her friend's like, you got a text from Jacqueline Woodson. You know Jacqueline Woodson? So it's very down low in my house. And it's that kind of dream you have that one day you're going to write books and you're going to have some kids and they're going to be so proud of you and they're going to be like, my mom is Jacqueline Woodson. And it's like, no. Anyway, when I was growing up, my mom left us with my grandmother and my grandfather. And because my mom and dad had separated when I was 2 months old, my mom moved us to South Carolina with her folks. And we called my grandfather Daddy, which is what my mother called him. And back in the day, for those of you who are parents, you know this, around my age, you know this. Back in the day, parents were allowed to tell kids which one was their favorite, right? You would like to say, you know, well, Johnny, you know I love you the most. And now you can't do that anymore, right? It's like you're supposed to say, I love you all the same. And you know you're lying, right? You know some of those kids, you're like, I could do without you today. But back in the day, there was so much more transparency, and people would tell the truth. So my grandfather, who we called Daddy, would always say, well, Jackie, you know you're my favorite, in front of my siblings. Like, you know, he gave no fucks. So, and then we knew my uncle loved my sister the most. We knew my grandmother and mother loved the brothers the most. But I adored my grandfather, and when I was 7, he died of cancer. And this is called Tobacco from Brown Girl Dreaming. Summer is over, a kiss of chill in the southern air. We see the dim orange of my grandfather's cigarette as he makes his way down the darkening road. Hear his evening greetings and the coughing that follows them. Not enough breath left now to sing, so I sing for him in my head where only I can hear. Where will the wedding supper be? Way down yonder in a hollow tree. The old people used to say a pinch of dirt in the mouth could tell tobacco's story. What crops are ready for picking? What needs to be left to grow? What soil is rich enough for planting and the patches of land that need a year of rest? I do not know yet how sometimes the earth makes a promise it can never keep. Tobacco fields lay fallow, crops picked clean. My grandfather coughs again, and the earth waits for what and who it will get in return. So I grew up in 2 religions, and for those, when I was younger, I had a teacher who, talked about us having something to write about. And I always thought I had nothing to write about, but I grew up Muslim and Jehovah's Witness. And although I had never, ever thought about writing about it, because I thought I'd get in trouble for both sides, once I started writing Brown Girl Dreaming, I was like, maybe that's not everybody's story. So I grew up reading the Bible and the Quran. I grew up going to the Kingdom Hall and to mosque. I grew up, I still don't eat pork. And the reason I don't eat pork, and for those of you who love pork, I'm not trying to make you hate on it, but I remember when I was very young, I got a ham and cheese sandwich from the bodega, and it was that boiled ham, and there was this iridescence on it. And I remember my uncle opening up the sandwich, and he's saying, you see that? That's the part of the pig they couldn't kill. The end. The absolute end for me. So it was a wrap. But my uncle had been incarcerated, and when he came home, he had converted to the Nation of Islam. And I guess my mom and grandma, at this point, we were living in New York City. And I guess they thought there was not enough religion in the house with the Joho thing going on. So they added the whole Muslim thing so that we were always in religion. If we were not going to the Kingdom Hall, we were studying the Quran. If we were not studying the Quran, we were out in field service. If we were not out in field service, we were talking about the food the white man had made to kill the black man. So it went on and on. Because we're witnesses, no Halloween, no Christmas, no birthdays. Even when the other kids laugh at us as we leave this classroom, just as the birthday cupcakes arrive, we pretend we do not see the chocolate frosting, pretend we do not want to press our fingertips against each colorful sprinkle and lift them one by sweet one into our mouths. No voting, no fighting, no cursing, no wars. We will never go to war. We will never taste the sweetness of a classroom birthday cupcake. We will never know the bitterness of a battle. So I want to say to the writers, first and foremost, thank you for telling your stories, for giving us a way to walk through the world, for giving us a way out of no way. When I became National Ambassador for Young People's Lit, which is a hella long title, right? I had to come up with a platform, and the platform was reading equals hope times change. And of course, it's that play on I hope times change, but it's also that equation of the fact that when we read a book, we come out of it different than we were when we went into it. And when I was chair of the National Book Awards, I saw that with the books that really spoke to me. I was someone different when I left that book. I was someone with more empathy. I was someone with, who was more thoughtful. And I was someone who just wanted things to be different in this world. And so it also means traveling around a lot and stuff like that, which my partner and my children are kind of happy for it because I'm the strict one in the family. So they're like, "You're going away again?" But I want to thank the book festival because I think you all are doing the stuff that's changing the times. And I was at a school, Manzanita today, where the kids were phenomenal. And it was the elementary school, and I was in the multi-purpose room, and there was one other black girl in the audience, and she was kind of looking at me tentatively like, "How did you get here, and where did you come from?" And I have never seen the likes of you before in this school. And I knew that the work I was doing in that moment was for that child. And I hope that each one of you know that there are the people out there that you're doing this work for, that we're not just writing to tell stories, but we're writing to change narratives. And it's important work, and now more than ever, it needs to be done. So I think because our car is waiting for us, and the wine is gone, I'm going to end by reading two pieces from Brown Girl Dreaming, which is, of course, the book I've been reading from, so I don't even know why I introduced it as that. This is called Maybe Mecca. So one thing, I don't know if other writers have this, but I hate earmarking my page, and I think that might be some kind of OCD thing, but I don't like doing it, and so I'm always looking for stuff. When I was a kid, I was not allowed to curse at all, and this is, for those of you who know Bushwick, you get your ass kicked if you didn't know how to curse. But and so I wasn't allowed to celebrate birthdays, I wasn't allowed to do a lot of stuff. So my partner's Jewish, I'm black, duh. Our kids are mixed race. We celebrate every holiday. If there's a holiday that I don't know about, you should tell me because I'm gonna add it to my list of stuff I wanna celebrate. And we also have, so February is Jacqueline Woodson birthday month. It's just over, but if you need to give me a present, I'm cool, because you know it's the shortest month. Between me and Black History, we both feel quite jilted. This is called Maybe Mecca. There is a teenager on our block with one arm missing. We call him Lefty, and he tells us he lost his arm in Vietnam. That's a war, he says. Y'all lucky to be too young to go. It doesn't hurt anymore, he tells us when we gather around him. But his eyes are sad eyes, and some days he walks around the block maybe 100 times without saying anything to anyone. When we call, "Hey, Lefty," he doesn't even look our way. Some evenings I kneel toward Mecca with my uncle. Maybe Mecca is the place Lefty goes to in his mind when the memory of losing his arm becomes too much. Maybe Mecca is good memories, presents and stories and poetry and arroz con pollo and family and friends. Maybe Mecca is the place everyone is looking for. It's out there in front of you, my uncle says. I'll know it when I get there. And this is called Music. So I read at the White House a couple of years, the old White House. Can we just have a moment for the old White House? And by the way, the ambassador for Young People's Lit has nothing to do with the new White House. I just want to let you know that. And it's funny because when you read at the White House, as Billy Collins will tell you, you have to get clearance, right? And so I wanted to read this poem called Power to the People. I didn't get clearance, even in the old White House. So I did get clearance for a poem called Bushwick and music. So I'm going to end with music. Each morning, the radio comes on at 7 o'clock. Sometimes Michael Jackson is singing that ABC is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Or Sly and the Family Stone are thanking us for letting them be themselves. Sometimes it's slower music, the 5 stair steps telling us that things are going to get easier. Or the Hollies singing, he ain't heavy, he's my brother. So on we go. My mother lets us choose what music we want to listen to, as long as the word funk doesn't appear anywhere in the song. But the summer I am 10, funk is in every single song that comes on the cool black radio stations. So our mother makes us listen to the white ones. All afternoon, corny people sing about Colorado, about everything being beautiful, about how we've only just begun. My sister falls in love with the singers, but I sneak off to Maria's house. We're safe inside her room with the pink shag carpet and bunk beds. We can comb our doll's hair and sing along when the Ohio players say he's the funkiest worm in the world. We can dance the funky chicken, tell imaginary intruders to get the funk out of our faces, say the word so hard and so loud and so many times, it becomes something different to us. Something so silly we laugh just thinking it. Funky, 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 we sing again and again, until the word is just a word. Until the word is just a sound, not connected to anything, good or bad, right or wrong. Thank you.
Jacqueline Woodson. Good job, Jackie. Well, while we're standing, we hope you all enjoy the evening. If you haven't done it, go home, mark your schedule for the weekend. We're going to have a great weekend. Thanks to all of our authors. We'll see you tomorrow. Good night and drive safely.